happened in the past or whatever, being dredged up and things like that, which number one, I'm not trying to diminish anybody's experience that happened, but there has to be a moment where, you know, we need to, as people, realize that we're all people and we're all human and we make mistakes, and people can be forgiven, people can be, I don't know, have a little bit of redemption, and as long as they're being made aware. I know that things are happening like in our culture right now, like in our own city, where people are taking up torches and doing things, and I'm just like, wow.
There has to be, I'm like, you know, I think about the same thing when we're talking about like racism and those individuals who are racist or who are, you know, maybe don't feel like they're racist, but they have racist tendencies, or they judge people on stigma or bias or something along those lines. Like, there has to be a space for them to be open about that, to share that, and to grow so that they can be a better person and understand where they came from. And if we're in a cancel culture, if we're in a state of like blame, we don't provide any space for those individuals to grow. And when it comes to accountability, I think that's part of that accountability is acknowledging what you've done, owning where you were, where those wrongs were, and then doing that work, like Ace just said, about, you know, being the better person, learning from that mistake and providing that space for them to grow. Otherwise, they're not going to change. They're not going to be open about that. They're not going to seek, you know, redemption in that sense. Like, it's not going to happen.
And I wanted to lead into that a little bit and talk about that and with you too, because I think a part of people being able to have that space is it comes to us to be able to have that moment, that teachable moment, to be like, look. And I think a part of it is that we're so quick to cancel, and we're so quick to hear your consequences, and this is your death sentence for the rest of your life, and you're just like not a valid human. But a part of it too comes from not having enough education and not really talking about things that are like that. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, like, so this month we're talking about sexual assault, and like, what are the differences between sexual assault, sexual harassment, sexual what is it? Predation?
Yeah.
Like, what are, like, you know, I think a lot of people don't have enough information or knowledge to be able to help their peers, to be like, hey, instead of just being like, this is wrong, but like, actually, this is wrong, and I'm going to tell you why this is wrong. And I'm going to tell you like what you should do in order for this not to be a wrong thing to do continually.
So, I mean, I think like at the end of the day, whether it's sexual violence or sexual assault, sexual harassment, sexual misconduct is, you know, something that people say, you know, it's about, as a victim or survivor, like, it's about being subject to something that's unwanted, that's sexual in nature in some way, whether it's a comment, a touch, you know, up to, you know, rape. And you know, those different, everything that falls under that category, you know, isn't necessarily going to be experienced the same way, and it may not need to be redressed in the same way. Like, you know, for example, sexual harassment is illegal in the workplace in that there is like a civil consequence for sexual harassment. So like, you know, if someone's sexually harassed at work, then they can get damages for that, like get like basically compensation or reinstated in their job or whatever. But that person isn't going to go to jail because there's no criminal law against, you know, making repeated unwanted sexual comments in the workplace. But there's a civil remedy for that versus, you know, it could escalate to, say that person starts following, you know, their coworker home, or, you know, posting on the internet about them, or escalating to something that would be more like stalking, which is a criminal offense, you know, and so like, that's something, I mean, stalking is something that's kind of a developing area of law in terms of what exactly qualifies as stalking, because people think like, oh, it's like a stranger in the bushes kind of a thing, but it's really just it's really a course of conduct directed at a person that's, you know, would cause them to feel afraid, you know, harassed or whatever. Different states have different ways of defining it, but essentially, you know, it's more that ongoing course of conduct where someone gets kind of obsessed with another person and is trying to provoke a reaction or trying to satisfy something within themselves that's like, you know, off kilter or whatever. And then of course, you know, I think we're more familiar with things like sexual assault or rape or something where it's like, you know, unwanted intercourse or unwanted, you know, sexual touching of some kind. And that is illegal, but that also doesn't mean that, you know, reporting to the police is what every survivor should or wants to do or would find, you know,
beneficial,
I guess, validating. But I think what we're seeing is people are even able to talk about it now and be validated sometimes, not always still, but it used to be that if people said I was sexually assaulted, they could pretty much expect to be told that they weren't, or that it was their fault, or that the person didn't really mean it, or that it was a compliment, or whatever. And I feel like we've kind of had this shift in our culture where we talk about this, where it's like, oh no, that is wrong. And that can include also, I know I'm like kind of ranting now, but that can also include like taking off a condom during sex without consent, or different sexual acts. Like maybe you're having sex with someone and like you don't want to do whatever and they do, and there needs to be a consent conversation or whatever communication there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was one of my questions was, how victims are perceived when they, tell someone else that they've been a victim of sexual assault or harassment or something along those lines. Have you seen a shift over, I would think, with the start of the Me Too movement in individuals, opening up about what that looks like, about what their experiences are, especially knowing that you're a teacher who teaches on this, you practice law on this, like, so I would think in your community, people would come to you or would be open to that idea, like, or at least you would be open to that.
I think
idea.
Also too, like working on a college campus. I mean, like, the statistics of women that are being raped and not reporting it, and the ones that are, like, it's such a whole culture there because you're just
like, how does that change? Over
have you seen a shift in all these things?
Well, yeah, I mean, most sexual assault is committed by someone known to the victim or survivor, and so I think, the issue there is that then what, right? So like, college campuses are being asked to then accommodate the survivor so that they don't have to go to class with the person who raped them, and that was developing before the Trump administration. And then the Trump administration really rolled some of that back. And I think it remains to be seen, what direction. I think we're moving back in a positive direction on that. But in terms of, being located kind of on a college campus professionally, yeah, I mean, people do tell me stuff. I mean, also just knowing that I'm a sexual assault, basically, attorney, or, somebody who works with sexual violence or gender-based violence, people in my personal life, like, tell me as well. Like, I think people see I post something pro survivor on Facebook, and so I'm the person that they Facebook message and say, this happened to me, and that's a heavy thing, but I'm honored to carry those stories and be trusted with those stories, both from my clients and from in my personal life, and students and coworkers.
Do you know? I know UMKC offered RAD, the program to teach individuals like self-defense techniques. I think it's. I'll look up what the RAD stands for. But I reached out to the sergeant at UMKC who teaches it, and he says right now they've canceled all of those instructional classes to empower individuals to protect themselves. Is that something that's still happening on your campus, or is that closed as well?
Go ahead and answer.
Did you want to say something?
I do. Like, well, I want you to answer first, but okay. I think that, I don't know. Like, I love that, and I love that aspect of like campuses trying to do that. But it's like, why are we not having more courses instead of teaching women how to defend themselves and going to fight? Like, why are we not having courses for men specifically to go to be like, maybe you shouldn't catcall that girl, maybe you shouldn't slap her ass, maybe you should act appropriately instead of like. Yeah. Trying to get women to like take time out of their day to defend themselves from you raping them. Like, that's, I don't understand that.
The classes are also geared for women. They don't list anything in there where a male.
I have never been to one, but in my head, like, I already know because growing up, like, that's a class for women so that they get attacked by a rapist. I'm like, why are we not teaching boys just not to rape? Why are we not making them take time out of their evenings to go to these classes? I don't understand that.
Totally. I mean, I think that there was this kind of surge of like self-defense is the answer or something like that. And it's like, well,
it's also it's programmed to like women to like make you feel empowered. And I'm like, I feel like walking down the street and wearing what you want and being yourself should be empowerment enough. You shouldn't need to have to like box someone or mace them.
Yeah.
Right. And also, like, by the time you're like engaged in hand-to-hand combat with someone, like, it's not a good day,
No, I don't feel empowered.
It's so trauma-inducing.
Even as a boy, if I have to hit someone, I don't. If I have to hit someone or throw them out from
Right.
where I work, like I don't feel empowered. That's a bad day for me.
Right. And the problem is that most sexual assault doesn't look like someone running up on you and you're gonna like, whatever, punch them or something. Like it's your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your, date or hookup or teacher or friend or parent, you know what I mean? Like you're not gonna punch that person in the face because it's more of a power play at that point. It's more
Yeah.
about, there's this thing like, oh, basically like if you don't fight back, you're like letting yourself be sexually assaulted. And it's like I'm really looking forward to us completely letting that trope go, because that's not what it is. Like, and I completely agree with you that like we should have classes on how to not rape people and how to deal with frankly mostly, male aggression and also just like toxic masculinity like harms everyone, all people, everyone across the gender spectrum is harmed by these like ideas of what you're supposed to be like to be a woman or to be a man. And if you're a woman, you're not supposed to fight back or you're supposed to be polite. That gets so many women, right? We're supposed to be polite. And so, telling someone to, shove off is not polite. Right. And so that's how a lot of women get they get like polited into like these horrible situations, and we have to like move past those things.
Yeah, the kindness, politeness is not going to sway, I think, the perpetrator at all. Like, it's not going to stop that person from acting.
Right. They're going to play on it. They're going to use it to their advantage and say like, oh, I know this person's not going to push back on me because of whatever power dynamic is going on, whether it's their gender, their sexual orientation, being trans, whatever it may be, people, abusers play on that. They prey on that.
Yeah. I just say,
and also not to like, discount like RAD or any other like organizations that are teaching self-defense and stuff, but I'm trying to shift like the vision or like the optics of like why are we focusing on this defense when we should be focusing on this defense.
Yeah, that's
taking the burden off of women.
Like so like, and also just to say, like you said, like no offense to the program, like I think those programs are great. And I took a self-defense class when I was like a, newer lawyer, and it truly changed my life. Not because I like think I'm gonna, I don't know. It was like a trauma-informed Krav Maga class with this really awesome teacher. But anyway, like it basically like I think being able to feel strong in your physical body and know how to get out of a tricky situation is great. I just don't think that's not going to solve sexual assault. It might make people feel more confident in the way they walk around and project themselves, which is never a bad thing. But it's not the answer to everything.
Yeah, I looked up what RAD stands for. It's rape, aggression, defense. It's like,
okay.
Yeah.
I like how rape and aggression are like right next to each other. Like that's 100%. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Who thinks of these programs? I mean, like,
the problem is it's sometimes hard. Sometimes it's hard to recognize that as aggression, though. Like that's what I'm saying with like the acquaintance sexual assault. It's like it doesn't always come off as aggression. It comes off as like, oh, I really like you. Oh, I like you should feel bad if you don't have sex with me or something. It's that type of manipulation, not like a knife.
I think a lot of rape is like a lot of it, like in sexual assault, I guess would be a lot of manipulation and a lot of like, oh, and then like I think like people are kind of portioned to be polite and to be like, oh, well, they didn't really mean it, or they were having a bad day, or like maybe I was wearing something too provocative, or maybe if I just want to drink too much or been at that party or did this, like you have this kind of feeling, I think, as, I don't know, human or American to like try to take that, because like you said, it's mostly somebody that so you want to take that burden off of them, and then in turn you end up placing it on yourself, which is it's not fair to you, and it's definitely not right.
Yeah, but I see it as a power play.
Yeah, and I feel like we need to probably have more classes instead of defense programs. We need to have more classes that are open to everyone, teaching about, what to do in those situations, how that works, why not, like, just don't do these things. You know what I mean? It's weird. You think that there will ever be a curriculum?
How to talk about consent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you think that there will ever be curriculums like that?
I mean, I think the consent thing is interesting because, when I was like in high school, everyone was just like, oh, gross. Like, who wants to ask someone if they want to have sex or something? And it's like, first of all, like, if you can't even talk about it, you should not be doing it.
Yeah.
But,
That's my first
like,
day.
yeah, I mean, so I think getting people, and this is where like also the cultural stigma about sex in general, it's like, it's this really oppressive combination of feeling like it's not okay to talk about, we have to get more comfortable talking about like sex and consent and things like that. And then, I think that does come from like sex ed, comprehensive sex ed and having consent be part of sex ed and things like that. And I do think I think that that's a great thing. And also people, people need to learn how to be like responsible for their own emotions, and the fact that, I think fighting certain stereotypes about, I don't know, like how to be in the world or what's expected of you or something like that, I think that can always be helped with education and conversation.
Mm-hmm. I like that idea of like, switching the game on those workshops where it's not focused on the victims, but it's focused on educating the perpetrators or educating the populace before they turn into a perpetrator. I think that's definitely something that needs to happen. It's something we're not going to do on this show. So.
But we're opening a conversation, which Unboxed does, because we want to unbox and start conversations that aren't normally talked about, so that hopefully people watching will continue these conversations.
So what can someone do as, say someone comes to me and they share that they have an experience that, it's under sexual assault or something along those lines. How can I help them? Like, what can I do?
I mean, I think the most important thing is to like be present with that person, and they've obviously chosen to tell you for a reason. And so, when people disclose to me, I generally say like, I'm so sorry that happened, thank you for telling me, thank you for trusting me. And I think to resist the urge to kind of try to fix it, because it just sucks. And sometimes you just need to say like, wow, that sucks. I'm really sorry, and then, I think just ground yourself and ask like, what can I do to help? Like, how can I support you? And a lot of times it's just, I just needed someone to tell, I just didn't want to be alone with this anymore. And then, you can check in with that person in the future. Obviously, you shouldn't have to be told that it's not your secret to share, right? So like, even if someone doesn't say like, please don't tell anyone, like you should not be, like it's someone else's truth to share. And so, it's not to say that they shouldn't share it or they should be ashamed or anything like that, or that it needs to be a secret, but like being a responsible steward of that information, I think is important. Don't spread it around. Unless your friend or your, the person who discloses wants you to, and then maybe help them get some resources, attend to them first, don't like, the point is to help your friend or your, this person in your life. And then it's to help them redress it in some way. And if they, they may need to go on their own journey as far as like, do I want to involve the police? Like, do I want to report it to like, I think it's like the Casey anti-violence program, you can just report violence, like just for their tracking purposes. Maybe that's something you want to do, like therapy, support groups, calling the RAIN hotline and stuff. I think the thing is to really see yourself as supporting that person, and that everybody's journey looks different. And one thing that I really try to get people to understand is like, you may have been through something very similar to what this person has been through, but that doesn't mean at all that that's going to be their experience. And so it's like, people often say like, oh, well, when that happened to me, I did X, Y, and Z, or I wanted Y. And that's okay, but you need to check in with your friend first and not just say like, oh, this is what you need because I know, because I've been through something, because everybody's life and experience is different. And then the worst part of it is like when people haven't been through anything, but they imagine what they would do or want or say, and then they judge a survivor based on like, oh, that's not what I would do if I was in that situation. It's like, I always tell people, you can say what you think you would do if you were subject to trauma or violence, but you have no idea until it happens to you. And people react completely differently in ways that are surprising and shocking. And, so I think it's just to recognize that someone's been through something really awful and they need a friend and they need a support system who's going to be discreet and supportive and generate some help. Like, here are some numbers I found. Can I find you a hotline to call? Like, can we call it together? if you want to report, can I go with you? Like, you know, I think just checking in with that person.
I really like that of just being the support, you know, just hearing them, being there with them, and then letting them guide that process. I really like that. Because, I mean, there's a potential there to step in to be like a savior, or, you know, like, I'll fix this for you. You've been hurt. You know, I'll take care of this. But that's not your place or space to do that. Yeah, I think it's important to know that.
Right. Or
So
like,
don't sign.
I'm going to go confront the person.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, don't confront the person. Don't tell the police. Don't tell your friend group. Don't post it on Facebook. You know, just wait. Just being present is like really the most important thing. You know, I have had probably hundreds of people tell me either domestic violence or trauma, sexual violence that they've been through, and like what I've learned over the years is to just put my feet on the ground, take a deep breath, and say like, I'm so sorry that happened to you, and that gets you just the space to kind of let the person process.
What is the legal ramifications of calling out somebody that has committed a crime that the victim or survivor hasn't like told people? Because I know, I think last year, I was invited to a couple of Facebook groups that were calling out people with their pictures saying like, this so-and-so person sexually assaulted my friend so-and-so on this day, but it wasn't posted by the victim or the survivor. It was posted by like their friends, and they're like doing this whole call out culture trying to get people fired. I know that even working at Woody's, I got people messaging me and being like, I was at your bar or whatever, and I saw them drinking on the patio. You need to like kick them out. And I'm like, I don't even know you. Like, and also I feel like that can't be legal, can it?
Well, you know, I think first of all, like, I don't know that we can assume that the survivor like didn't ask the friend to post that or something like that. You know, it's like we don't really know what the story behind it is. It's like, you know, the legality is dicey because, you know, there's like slander and libel laws. Like you basically can't like ruin someone's reputation like based on lies. But of course, truth is a defense to that. And so if it's not a lie, then it's, you know, I'm not giving any legal advice. You should definitely, you know, but like truth is a defense. And so, you know, speaking the truth is okay. I think like I would feel concerned about like checking in with the survivor that that's what that person wanted the friend to do, you know, and if it is like, that's okay. You know, I mean, like people have different ways of wanting to process, and people may want their community to know about something terrible that's happened. And like, I don't necessarily think that's like inherently, you know, but you also have to just be realistic about, you know, like if something happens at a bar and, you know, you're like, you can't I mean, you know, it's like you can't control other people's behavior basically. And so, you know, as a survivor, you just have to find a way, you know, to keep yourself emotionally and physically safe, you know, and that may or may not include enlisting the community, you know.
What kind of impact does sexual assault really have on the LGBTQ plus community in your experience? Is there a marginalized difference between, I guess, heterosexual people and LGBT
that's it,
community? Is
well,
there...
I think the statistics, like, I mean, first of all, anytime we talk about like sexual assault and at all, we have to talk about like violence against trans women in particular. Trans people experience extremely high rates of violence. It's like basically, you know, an epidemic and something that we need to be like panicked about and trying to find solutions for. And so, you know, that's something just in terms of like looking at the whole community. You know, I know that like LGBTQ people experience sexual violence at the same or higher rates to straight people. And, you know, I think it can be a little bit tricky because all these stereotypes about gender, you know, obviously are maybe like subverted, you know, if it's like a person of the same gender or sex, like attacking someone of the same gender or sex, something like that, you know, you may, there's also this like internalized homophobia stuff that gets like really woven into, like, you know, I was saying like perpetrators kind of manipulate their victims and kind of use like cultural like power imbalances and like internalized homophobia is a huge part of that. Like I've had clients who, you know, really truly believe that like what they've been through is like partly their fault because they chose to, you know, be with another woman or something like that.
Or openly, like if I wouldn't have held their hand, or if I wouldn't have had short hair, or if I wouldn't have wore an earring, or something that is like, you know, clearly different and labeling you as a queer person. Like I hate that. And that's something too that comes back to like, I wish, you know, like as adolescents and sex ed and everything, that we would have classes to talk about like aggressions, you know, all this stuff, and like how we
dealing with being human.
Yeah. And like how the differences and celebrating that and understanding that people are different and we don't need to, because talking about even sexual events with trans individuals, there's so much more aggression that comes not even just from a stranger, like, you know, calling you a name down the street, or somebody, you know, when you're in the bathroom trying to harass you and do this, but it also comes from like, you know, law enforcement. It comes from, you know, people that are still very, I don't know. I think that people that do those things, I don't know if they're just afraid because they've never seen things that are different. And so people inherently, when they get afraid, they tend to get aggressive and they tend to get
violent.
Yeah, violent. And just something that we could.
There's a lot of like internalized self-hatred and all that kind of stuff. And the other thing about like the LGBTQ community in particular is like, I think it can be hard to speak out about or feel like you want accountability for sexual violence when it is like a same-sex situation, because I think like any, you know, it's a family, and I feel like, you know, people almost feel like they're betraying their own, or like, you know, it's like when I first started doing this work, it was like, you know, like the major LGBTQ activist organizations were like, let's not talk about sexual violence in our community. Let's not talk about domestic violence in our community. Like we need to get marriage equality first, you know? And it's like basically get in line and support the community and don't like air our dirty laundry kind of a vibe. And I like really, you know, I don't want people to feel that way at all, you know, like it's not a reflection on you or the community or being queer or what it, you know, that's not like, it's a reflection on the person who attacked or abused you, like not on the community or their identity, because it's like there are terrible queer people just like there are terrible straight people, you know, like they're like there are all types of queer people, you know, and some of them are abusive, and that sucks, but you know, we can't just ignore that because we're trying to achieve some greater good.
That's a really good point. I think
that's a great point.
Focusing on the, you know, you're trying to achieve not the greater good, but making space for everyone to feel safe and brave, you know, in that where they are and how they identify. Yeah, it goes back to, I just keep wanting to, what Ace was talking about, like those teaching you, you know, what it means, what consent means, what it means to be a person, what it means to deal with your emotions and to deal with people who are different than you, and to understand that. Yeah, you have to learn that on your own. That's not something you're taught.
Yeah, like I don't think that I'm a horrible person. I think that for the most part, you know, like I definitely have my moments where I need growth in area. And I think this past year has definitely taught me that a lot of things that I have had to deal with in the past few weeks, past few months, are things that I think that I wouldn't have had to deal with if I would have grown up in a culture that was accepting, that taught diversity, that taught inclusivity, that definitely taught me how to like love and like get that, like receive that love, own that love, and have like some semblance of adolescence that mirrored like my heterosexual peers and like all these things. And I think that the issues, I mean, I've really been in therapy a lot this past few weeks. And I really think that, you know, and not that like, I'm just like, oh, poor is me, like it didn't have that or whatever, but like,
no, but you're learning.
But also too, it's like, it's not too late. Like we can always start. We need to start some kind of like programs. And like growing up with, you know, I see like my nieces and nephews who are young and little, and I'm like, their view of the world now is so much different than mine was, you know, almost 40 years ago growing up, just because all the works and all the steps that we've taken as a culture with everything. And I'm like, why are we so far behind? And even now I still feel like as much as far as we've come, there's still things that we should be doing that should be very like elementary at this point, but we're still not implementing. And I don't understand that. And like this, like no Tino Shea, like not to be, you know, like we're still having people being like, well, women should just take self-defense classes. And I was like, or maybe you should just have a class for guys, have them take 3 nights a week out of their lives to go to a class to not effing rape people. Like,
yeah,
it doesn't make sense to me. It's so much.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I agree. And I think anytime you get like that stigma and shame and like abuse from the world onto like an identity or a community, then that makes those people more vulnerable, because like, I don't know exactly why, you know, but the statistics show that people who basically been through sexual assault before are more likely to be sexually assaulted. You know, queer people are more likely to be sexually assaulted. There's something about being disempowered that is just, it creates a condition, and it's nothing wrong with the person whatsoever. It's wrong with the world and the attacker. But, you know, like, it creates a condition where people prey on that. You know, they see that vulnerability and then they exploit it. Oh, this is your fault. You should feel bad. You know, you're the problem. Like, or, you know, with bisexuality, there's like this theory of like, you know, basically that coming out as bi makes you like basically saying like, oh, I'm sexually available to everyone. So like that, you know, that's why there's like particularly high rates for bisexual women. I think it's like 61% like have experienced sexual violence, which is like a lot higher than other groups. But, you know, it's any stigma is like it gets combined basically with this predation and kind of harms people.
It is. I think that, like, you know, growing up LGBTQ plus or whatever, like, you already have like that thing about you where our culture just kind of deems you as a little bit broken. And so forever, even no matter how successful you are, like monetarily in your career, academically or whatever, there's always still that stigma behind you that you're still a little bit broken because you're not like the norm, like the mainstream, the media like enhanced like view of like lifestyle or whatever that looks like to everyone else. So inherently you still kind of take on that, like, well, maybe I'm a little bit broken, maybe there are things wrong with me, but inherently, like,
yeah,
if you're born human, you're fucking broken. Like, we all have mental health issues, we all have bouts of depression, we all have, you know, body issues, we all have like where we don't feel smart enough or strong enough or like fast enough or whatever, like, so we're all, I don't like to say broken, but we're all like flawed. We're just flawed.
We're all an unfinished puzzle.
Yeah, we're all unfinished. And that doesn't diminish your value in any sense.
No.
Yeah, definitely. And nobody deserves to be exploited or taken advantage of or put in a situation that makes them feel uncomfortable at all.
As we're entering like a new phase for LGBTQ plus individuals, where that normalcy of coming out in their youth, you know, coming out, you know, like as young as, I think yesterday there was a trans individual that was at a place where I was doing outreach, and they were like 10 or 12 years old, you know, and they were working, you know, with a volunteer about like, you know, binders and, you know, and like getting themselves ready to start, you know, transitioning and what that looks like, or at least, you know, wearing clothes that how they identify. And I thought like the world is completely different for that individual. When I was 12, there was no talk of being gay other than the fact that it's wrong and don't do it, you know, and those people go to hell, and that's the end of the conversation. We're not talking about this again. And with the world being different and LGBTQ plus individuals having access to like consent, you know, training and healthy, safer sex workshops. Like we offer those here, you know, in Kansas City. Like before the pandemic, I was doing a lot of those, you know, with like Synergy and with Transformations, and, you know, and my cohort has picked those up because that's her population that she works with. And how do you think, with those youth being empowered of knowing, you know, what to look for and, you know, and owning their body and owning their space, like, will be different as far as like how sexual assault impacts people? So roundabout, long way to get there to that question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that putting people on an equal playing field and really instilling in people the value of everyone, regardless of how different they are or what their, you know, identity is really important, both from a victim's perspective and from a perpetrator's perspective, because a lot of perpetrators feel entitled. They've been told that this is what people act, this is what men act like, this is how, you know, you show dominance and how you basically, I don't know, like increase your social cachet or something, like by being like, you know, sexually aggressive or whatever. And it's like, you know, getting rid of that entitlement and getting to where everyone just feels like, you know what, I'm a human being and I'm entitled to be treated with respect, and I'm entitled to, you know, or whatever, like I'm entitled to be treated with a baseline level of dignity and like regardless of what the situation is. And I think that equaling that balance a little bit, you know, it's not going to eliminate sexual assault, because that's just, you know, I don't see that happening, but I think it will really change the dynamics and really, like, you know, even stuff like sexual harassment and stuff. It's like even in my lifetime, the way that people speak in the world has changed completely. And like the things that, you know, were said when I was in high school about women, about LGBTQ people, like, not that those aren't said still, but it's not socially acceptable in in many places now. And so I think that does start to change the fabric of society in a way that, like, you know, because walking around and feeling a little safer in the world as like a woman, you know, or as a bisexual woman, or whatever your identity is, you know, I think like can only be a good thing in terms of like people staying safe and feeling like they have options if they're put in an unsafe situation. Like they don't just shut down and think like, okay, well, I don't know what to do because I've only ever seen, you know, basically people be treated like this and nobody acts like it's a problem, so it must not be a problem, you know?
Yeah. I think it's important too. It's like, you know, like you said, like you've seen the change or whatever. I think the visibility of queer culture. And I have friends, girlfriends, friends that are girls that have said that, you know, they've been alone at night or whatever, but they see some man walking down and they'll get a little bit like apprehensive, but like then they'll be like, oh, well, he's gay, so like I feel safer. And the fact that there's visibly like a gay man out there like lets them know that, number one, it's a man, but number two, he's not going to do anything. And number three, if anything, he'll probably help me. So I think like having that visibility and being out there in our culture. And I think I wanted to pull back a little bit about like what you said about even trans kids being visible and having all these spaces for them to be able to do these things. I think that a part of my instance when I was younger, growing up as a queer person and like I was sexually assaulted, times were different. I didn't say anything, but also too, like, I had a lot of friends that were doing a lot of sex work, you know, and a lot of them coming from small places and not being educated and not being supported by family, not being able to be themselves. And I think that they really thought and saw to themselves that this is really the only work that I'm good for, because they never really saw queer people being attorneys, being doctors, being scientists, being managers of things. You know, they only saw them as like low-paying jobs or uneducated or having to revert to sex work. And then when they did sex work and they were sexually assaulted, they definitely internalized that and be like, oh, it's my fault, or I shouldn't have done this, or if I would have been like, no, like you still don't need to be subjected to violence. But I think like social media has definitely helped like elevate the platform for queer culture.
It's like not being the 10th victim, 10th queer victim killed on TV, but you're the detective who's doing the investigation has changed.
And just kind of normalizing. Like, I hate to say normalizing. I think that's
there's still a long way to go with like representation. But I like one point I want to make just about sex work is like that goes back to the stigma thing that I was saying, right? Because it's like, oh, like the messaging that is that person doesn't have value in society, or they're only good for whatever, and that's bad, you know, like there's this inherent judgment of sex work. And so it's like that makes people more vulnerable, not to mention like when you're outside of kind of the bounds of like legality, people feel like they can't. I mean, number one, sometimes it's the police who are attacking sex workers. Number two, like, you know, I think there's a huge fear obviously of like getting any type of protection from the state or from the police or anything like that. So it's just like there's so many vulnerabilities there as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point that you know, it's hard to talk about, you know, the police in the sense of that's a place where you can go to access, you know, protection when, you know, for especially marginalized individuals, for trans individuals, for Black trans individuals, like that is the last place they're going to go, especially if they have been a victim of sexual assault or anything along those lines where they are a victim. They're not going to reach out to those places that have murdered them, treated them as less than. So there's a whole string of things that need to change,
especially in our culture now where, you know, we're watching a trial where we literally witnessed them murder
Witnessed the
somebody,
murder.
but we're still having a trial for this person.
Yeah.
So of course it's going to be apprehensive,
Yeah.
especially if you've been. And I think too, like that goes along in the fact too with like, not just like police, but in law enforcement, but you know, like other kind of city officials, which would be like attorneys, judges, things like that, and not wanting to share and trust. Yeah, I don't know. How do you combat that?
I mean, I think it's important to talk about redressing sexual violence in like a multifaceted way, because I think sometimes we assume, oh, you've been sexually assaulted, so you must want to tell the police and you must want this person to be prosecuted. You must want them to go to jail. And number one, I mean, we could have a whole separate day, hour, day, whatever week talking about, you know, all the issues with the criminal justice system from, you know, defendant and victim perspective. But suffice it to say, it's not always a vindicating experience for victims or an empowering experience for victims to deal with the criminal justice system. And so, you know, there need to be other ways of accountability that aren't necessarily, you know, criminal justice related. And I also want to say, like, you know, this is very survivor specific. So each person is entitled to have whatever reactions that they have, and they're entitled to want whatever they want in terms of their personal safety or vindication or whatever. And then we as a society have to kind of figure out what to do with that. But the one optimistic thing I would say is, like, there is now this thing where you like say what happened basically online, you know, publicly, and let kind of the court of public opinion decide. And, you know, it's, I think first that used to be a really, really, really like a losing proposition. And I think now post Me Too, there is a little bit more of an opportunity to have some kind of just public accountability that may feel, you know, valuable to survivors, even who don't want to participate in the criminal justice system.
What about for individuals who in the moment, you know, like in the moment it happens or shortly after they're experiencing sexual assault, you know, and they say, I don't want to engage, you know, I don't want to do this, but they change, like, can they change their mind and do that? Like, and then move forward? Like, what does that look like for somebody who maybe as a victim, they're just not in a space to absorb all that information and what they can do. And so they say, I'm not going to do anything. And then they change their mind later once they've had time to process.
Yeah, I mean, of course, like, you know, from my perspective, I think talking to a lawyer, like a victim-centered lawyer who's going to give you some options is always useful. And, you know, no, you don't have to make up your mind. I mean, obviously, okay, I will say, like, you have 72 hours to get a rape kit if that's something that you're interested in doing. And so, you know, you do want to go to the hospital pretty quickly if you think there's a chance you might want that evidence in the future. And, you know, it's obviously everybody's own personal decision on how to deal with that, but you can go and like then later decline to pursue it. But anytime you interface with the system, then the system can kind of go its own way. So I'm not going to guarantee to anyone that they'll have power over that. But in general, if you don't want to participate, they're not going to press charges because it's just hard to do without the victim. But you know, things happen. So you want to, you know, I'm not going to encourage anyone to do that, but like definitely say if you think there's a chance that you might want to have this evidence in the future, you should go and get a rape kit pretty quickly. But yeah, I mean, whether you involve police or not, you know, something might have happened, you know, a long time ago, and you still have the option to go back to police. I mean, of course, the closer it is in time, the more likely that the police will take it seriously and be able to pursue evidence and create a strong case against the person, if that's what you want. But so it's just to say, like, I mean, I'm not saying that you can just, like, you know, wait for 3 years and then go back and it'll be the same as if you went to the hospital that night. Like, there are some real kind of evidentiary advantages to going right away, but you can definitely change your mind. And I think, you know, there's also like civil options, like getting a restraining order, you know, protection order against that person so that you don't have to be around them. That's an option for a lot of people. And you do have to like speak out and go to court and stuff, but, you know, you can usually, you could get a lawyer to help you do that. And, you know, you don't need a lawyer to do it. You can do it on your own, but you know, that's an option that's kind of a little bit of a, like, the person's not going to go to jail, but they're going to have to stay away from you, which can be
It could be something
I
in
guess,
itself. At least it's
addressing
something.
helpful.
I'm always looking at it from the victim's point of view too, and it's just like, you know, you do things like that and you want to feel safe and you want to maybe get some kind of retribution to what happened to you, but also like court of public opinion, because I always feel like just as much as you have people that may be behind you and supporting you, in my experience, what I've seen is the person that has been the perpetrator or the aggressor or the abuser has just as many people behind them, if not more, like trying to intimidate and do that. And like, it's just, it makes me, I don't know, like what are, I guess, are there any specific like signs or cues or clues that you could, I don't know, tell, like, if you think that maybe one of your friends has been sexually assaulted, and if there are, like, how do you reach out to them? How do you speak to them? How do you, and what can you do to help? You know, I mean, to support, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think being kind of going back to what I was saying before, like being vocal about your support for survivors and your lack of tolerance for sexual violence and sexual harassment, like I think is really important, because that sets the stage. And like, you know, like, I mean, I, as a survivor as well, like look at my Facebook feed and I note when people like an article about, you know, this or that, you know what I mean? Like you're kind of assessing, it's almost like the same with like, you know, people's like homophobia. You kind of are clocking like where people are on the scale, and you want somebody who is like being vocally supportive of survivors. And so, you know, I think that's one thing. And then like if you do, you know, either hear something or see something or whatever, like, you know, I think, you know, proceed with caution, obviously. You know, I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to do it, depending on how close you are to the person. Obviously, if it's like, you know, a distant somebody you haven't talked to in ages, you shouldn't like call them up and be like, hey, were you raped? You know, that's not going to work. But
yeah,
you know,
that's appropriate.
if you do have that person, so you want to support, you know, post on Facebook something, you know, pro Me Too or something like that. Create an environment where they would see you as someone to trust. But if it's a good friend and you're like, hey, friend, like, is something going on? You know, like I think just the way that you would approach any delicate subject like that, you know, you have to feel it out and know when the right moment is and be willing to let go if the person says, no, I don't want to talk about it or whatever. And the overwhelming message should be like, I love you and I care about you, and I want you to be treated so well all the time. And it makes me so upset to think that maybe you weren't treated that way. And if there's anything I could do to ever help you, you know, or support you, or you ever want to talk, let me know. And if you just want to sit together and be quiet, then you can do that. You know, it's just being a good friend.
Yeah, being there for them when they need you. Yeah, I like that. You know, like sharing a message, making a post, you know, just letting people know that you are somebody that they can go to instead of seeking those individuals out or trying to touch that, you know, like touch on that topic with them when it's more important that, you know, they may not want that trauma relived. They may not want to be in a space where they want to go through that again. And your message to them is going to opening that Pandora's box for them. So, yeah, letting them know that you're a person. And an easy way to do that is on Unboxed. If you scroll down, and you can select any of our numerous posts for the month of April, which are all about sexual assault awareness. So, you know, sharing any of those is a great way to let people know that you're a supporter, but you're also helping us, you know, increase our likes, follows, and get the message out about the work that we're doing. So just a little plug there.
Definitely.
I love a little plug.
Yeah. And just remembering it's not about you if somebody does or doesn't choose to disclose to you, you know, it's not a reflection on you. And even if it's a close friend and they choose not to tell you, like, that's okay. You know, they're on their own journey, and like, you know, it just may not be the right moment. And that's not a reflection on you as a person. You know, just try not to center yourself in this story. You're not the main
It's not
character.
about you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah.
as we are like wrapping up, there are a couple of organizations in Kansas City, like Mosca, and Kansas City Anti-Violence Project. So we have those here, but those obviously aren't everywhere. So are there, you know, like programs or organizations that you would recommend, like maybe national ones or something that you've worked with in the past?
Hotlines.
Yeah. So the biggest one would be RAIN, the rape abuse something. Incest National Network. So it's RAINN.org. RAIN. They have the National Sexual Assault Hotline. I mean, if you Google National Sexual Assault Hotline or Sexual Assault Hotline, you'll see it. And then, I mean, there is also sort of the National Anti-Violence Project, which is particularly serving LGBTQ folks, which is located in New York. And so it's like the Anti-Violence Project. And they have like a website as well. So, and actually, if you go to, I think I found this on Human Rights Campaign. There's like a list of resources. I mean, at lots of places on the internet, there are lists of resources, but there are LGBTQ specific resources. So if you feel like that's what you would respond best to, then you can definitely go in that direction and find that particular support, because, you know, there's obviously like a comfort level there as well.
Yeah. I like that you mentioned RAIN. Like, not everybody likes to talk on the phone. And so they offer a chat system, so you can just type it in, you know, and sometimes it's easier to type it out than it is to try and relive that trauma and talk through it. So there is an option for people to share their story or to get help without having to talk. Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing I would say is, like, you don't have to know what you want to call these hotlines. Like, you can literally just call and be like, I don't even know what I want. I just need to talk. I know that this is a hotline for me, and so I wanted to call, and they'll help you figure out. Like, a lot of times I have clients who come to me and I'm like, so what are you looking for? And they're like, I don't know. Like, I just basically, I need help figuring out even what I want. And that's definitely something that hotlines and even lawyers can help you with.
That's really good information. Yeah. I didn't even think about that. Like, that expectation that they have to have a plan or that they need to be doing something.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. There's none of that.
Yeah. You just want support.
Yeah. You need to tell somebody. You may not have somebody in your life to tell, and like these people are the ones that you could reach out to. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna drop what Mosca's 24-hour crisis line is: 816-531-0233. So again, if you weren't ready, 816-531-0233, and we'll drop that in the chat below, so that their website's on there as well, and the RAIN one. Ace, this is a topic that we're continuing on. So like next week is going to be focused on like just workplace engagement and what that looks like in the workplace as we move forward. Are there any last thoughts that you want to share as we wrap up?
Yeah, I don't know, like thinking like just accountable and teachable moments. And I'm a big proponent of like, if you see something, say something. And you know, being here in the past couple of years, I've grown, I think, my friendships with trans individuals like exponentially. And going out with them, just, you know that like everybody's different. Like you don't experience things the way that other people do, but also making sure that you are, you know, looking out for your friends in every situation wherever you're at. And if you see something or something's not right, like say something, speak up, be like, hey, maybe you shouldn't talk to my friend like that. Maybe you shouldn't treat them this way. And even if you don't know them and somebody's saying or doing something to somebody that's inappropriate, like you should speak up and be like, that's not cool. We shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
And having teachable moments, I think too, because I think not only holding people accountable, but making sure that we're educating them as to why we shouldn't do this, and maybe another productive way of giving somebody a compliment as opposed to just slapping their ass or catcalling them.
Yeah. Odd, be nice.
Yeah. And I just want to encourage anybody that knows anybody that has been a victim of any kind of sexual assault or violence, that you just love them as much as you can and let them know that you're there for them. And anybody that has been a victim 100%, like, just know that you're not alone and people are watching and they love you and they want to support you, and we're just going to let you, I guess, guide that way.
Yeah. Gillian, what about you? Do you have any last words as you take us out?
I couldn't say anything better than that. I think that's totally right. Speak out, speak up, and just be there for people who've experienced this, because unfortunately there's a lot of us out there. And so, it is its own community. And so that's one of the things that's been really also gratifying about sort of the viral Me Too movement is just realizing how many, survivors are out there, and it's going to be okay. And it's really, it can be really, really hard, but there are a lot of resources out there for you.
That's really good. Yeah. Google a support group. I'm sure there's a few on Facebook. Sure.
Or Instagram.
Or Instagram or Twitter or whatever platform you use. Which is also, we're also on all those as well.
Yeah, follow us.
All right, well, thank you, Gillian, for joining us, and thank you to our viewers. Tune in next week when we talk about the workplace environment for sexual assault, and then we'll build off of that going into the virtual world. So we'll be talking about like hookup apps and dating apps and what that looks like for sexual assault, and we'll end it with real life experiences. It's like just walking down the street and someone catcalls you. What that's like.
Do we have a special guest next week?
Oh, we do.
Can I tell people?
Yeah.
Oh my God, Miss Heidi Banks is going to be here. She's going to be in the flesh on our show.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see her because it's been a minute because she moved away.
She did move away. Yeah. We had to fly her in for this.
Yeah, she's amazing. I don't know if you know Heidi Banks, Gillian, but she is dubbed Queen of the Bears here in Kansas City. Beautiful drag queen. Really good friend, Brian.
Oh.
Yeah.
Amazing. Also, I want to thank you for joining us, Gillian. It was very nice to meet you. I hope that we get to meet in person one day because I want to give you a hug.
Yes.
Thank you for all the work that you're
Definitely.
doing. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
And anybody that needs any resources, Wes will be posting all of those things. And feel free to reach out to us at any point and ask questions, give us feedback. And if you or anybody that you know would like to be a guest on our show, please definitely reach out to us as well.
Yes.
Thank
Thank y'all.
you.